Hi there and welcome back to Pierpoint Custom Rod Building and Repair. So we're at the stage now, so 4 hours has gone by, so we're now looking at putting on the second coat. So just give it a little test. So yeah, it's still tacky, but 4 hours have gone by, so we're going to get the second coat on. So what we're going to do now is just prepare ourselves. So there's the original foil dish from the high build finish. One or two bubbles in there, not too worried about that, but generally that's quite clear. So it's got the good bubble release technology that it speaks about. Okay, and it says that on the tin. It's got the XAR air release chemistry in there, so we're quite pleased with that. Looking at the resin there on the guide wraps, yep, can't see any bubbles. It's nice and level, and it's a nice glossy finish as well. So we're going to prepare ourselves before we get started. So new foil dish, make sure you give it a wipe out, which I have done with this one, and I don't know if you can see on the camera, but there's a great big dirty black mark there, and that's the tarnishing that I was talking about that's inside that dish, so you need to get rid of that. Okay, so that's nice and clean, ready to go. Excuse me. And then the brushes I did earlier anyway, so when I finished I washed them up. So what I'm going to do is just pop them into my resin brush cleaner there, just give them a soak just in case while they've been sitting there there's any dust, dirt or debris on them, and then just give those a wipe off, and then we're ready to go. And we're probably only going to be using the wider one, the 1/2 inch brush anyway, so let's just get that out of the way. So we're done with that, and the resin brush cleaner, that can just go out of the way for the time being. So we're almost ready to knock up the varnish, the resin rather. Okay, so we're back to our syringes. Let's start with the hardener. So make sure you use the right syringe, and we're just going to go the same as before. So we're just going to go 3 cc's of each, and then I'll do the rest of the rod off camera just to make it a bit easier for myself. Okay, now since we've been doing this, of course, the temperature in the workshop, because the sun is shining, has gone up. So there's 3 cc's, and there's no air bubbles in that whatsoever, because this has obviously warmed up over the last 4 hours. That's virtually clear. Okay, so we'll pop that into the dish. So there's 3 cc's of that, and I can see there's no bubbles in that whatsoever. Okay, and that's the high build, none whatsoever. And then we go for the resin. Again, it's blue in colour, so I should think that that has also thinned out a little bit with the heat. So we're just going to put 3 cc's of that in the syringe as well, so hopefully you can see that. And again, clear, no bubbles whatsoever. So again, that heat, that nice warm workshop, makes a big difference. So there's 3 of each. Excuse me, I coughed this morning. So I'm going to put that on. Then you put the wrong cap on, the wrong thing. Okay, so let's move those out of the way as well. So we're going to set the stopwatch again. So we know we've got a pot life of 30 minutes, and then the mixing time. Okay, so 2.5 minutes. So we've got the marbling effect straight away as you blend the two together. So it's exactly the same process as what we did before, so that's no different. A few bubbles in there as we're mixing, so we use the spatula so it entrains less air, and you're just folding that in rather than whisking it. Okay, now because that resin was obviously nice and warm to start with, you're going to get that flow very, very quickly. Okay, so you can see there. It's just getting thinner, and as I said in my previous video about the exothermic reaction that you get, obviously it produces its own heat, so that heat then goes into the mixture and allows it to become a little bit more viscous. Again, don't forget to scrape the edges down. Okay, that's really important that all the mix gets mixed, otherwise you could end up with some sticky parts on your high build finish. Okay, so I've still got a little bit of marbling in there. Not so many bubbles this time because it's fairly viscous, fairly thin, and also because it's an aluminium foil and you've got my hand underneath, it's also getting the heat from my hand as well. It's just coming through into that high build. As you can see, just a couple of streaks in there, but the blue dye that's in the resin side of this Gen 4 is also disappearing as well. So once the heat's applied, that disappears. Again, make sure you get those edges. Okay, just see that. A few bubbles in there, but see how thin that is, and for a high build it's very thin, and the bubbles are just releasing, okay, to the surface as I'm mixing it, okay, because it's got that XR technology. Excuse me. So how we're doing on the time, let's just have a little time check. 2.5 minutes bang on, and that's usually when you're mixing it and you kind of know it's running clear, you know that that's bang on about the 2.5 minutes. But Gen 4 recommends about 3 minutes mixing time, so we're going to give it that. And don't forget, you're also doing the equal parts, 3 cc's of each. Okay, that's a 1:1 ratio. And that is about it. So there's your 3 minutes. Just working a little bit cack-handed here because of the camera angle. And there we go. And just about there. So there's no streaks in there, there's no runs. Okay, we're just about there, so we can let that settle down a little bit. See, I don't like wastage in the workshop, so I like to clean everything up and reuse it. Okay, so there's a few bubbles in there. Not too worried about those at the moment, so we can blow those out. Just the ones that are on the surface. So it's exactly what we did before, and also the heat from your hand, as I say, will be enough to put a bit more heat in there. Okay, and just get rid of the rest of those bubbles. So I'm not overly concerned because I know that this is good stuff. Okay, so ready to go. Second coat is going on. So you do need that first coat to be slightly tacky, so the top coat's got something to bond to. You can still leave it for about 12 hours. I wouldn't leave it any more than that before you get your second coat on, because otherwise you'd have to rub it down a little bit. Okay, because it needs a key. But you can see it's quite liquid, it's like water, it's clear. Okay, so don't worry about getting it on the rod, and also the edges. I'll show you how to finish those off in a minute. So you just want really good coverage. At this stage, I'll try and be as quick as I can. And where we had a couple of threads poking through originally, that's covered those now. So I use my block, and again you can see just in there those bubbles have virtually disappeared. They're just breaking as I'm using the resin. Okay, that's great. Let's just get those edges done in there. Probably come back to those. Okay, and that's why we need the block, just to steady your hand. Takes time, yeah, so not to be rushed. There we go, got a nice finish there, and then we'll just concentrate on this side as well. Some people like to leave a nice big thick line on there, so you can just drop the resin on And I say because it's got the good level qualities, that will soon flow and make it nice and even. As long as you've got enough on there to cover the threads, keep the seawater out, stop it from coming undone, that'll be absolutely fine. Okay, so that's one side done. Just going to move on to the other side now. Okay, so we'll get that on fairly quickly. Yeah, you don't want to be too frightened with this stuff either. Be quite positive with it. Okay, it's good stuff. And we've got good coverage there. As you can see with this second coat, I'm just loading it on, so it's a nice thick coat. And just get nicely to the edges. To that trim band area. And then we'll finish that off in a minute. So there was one or two threads that were a little bit fuzzy, just showing through, but when you put your subsequent coats on, that's enough to cover it, to get rid of it. Hides a multitude of sins. Okay, we're just going to finish that edge off. You can use the spatula again, I used it in the previous video, but just for speed I'm just going to use my brush. Okay, so there we go. Just try and smooth that out a little bit. Okay, and then we're going to stop the rod in a minute and just let it drip off the bottom so it's nice and even. And I just need to check my edges. That looks really good on that side, and that's looking good on that side, so we've got good coverage. You don't want to have to be going through and making a third coat. Just going to put a little bit more in there. And the important thing is, of course, that where the guide feet are, just in there. Sometimes the threads will show through. You don't want any reason for seawater to find its way. So that's really good, quite pleased with that. I'm just going to stop the rod, just allow it to drip off the bottom. Okay, just like that, just to make sure